Well, on the 100th anniversary of Congress passing the 19th Amendment, which would be ratified the following year, guaranteeing women the right to vote, 2019 is a record-setting year for women leaders in America. Nancy Pelosi, the first woman ever elected Speaker of the House in 2007, back in that role again. Roughly 24% of the House of Representatives comprised of women, the highest percentage ever. That also includes one of our area's representatives, 21st District Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, the Congresswoman joining us from Washington, D.C. today. Congresswoman Stefanik, thank you so much for your time today on In Focus. We appreciate it.
I'm so excited to be here and talk to you about how it's so important to have more women in office.
Yeah, let's talk about that. This is a historic female delegation in Congress. Almost 25% of all members of Congress are women. Obviously, there has to be tremendous pride in that aspect, and you being a part of it.
Absolutely. So I'm serving in my third term, but we've certainly seen an increase that's significant in terms of the number of women who are represented in the halls of Congress. What I have been focused on is making sure that we are increasing Republican women as well, because in order to have a diverse Congress that's reflective of the American public, we need to do so in both parties.
Yeah, Congresswoman, let's talk about that. 102 of the voting members in Congress are women. Only 13 of them are Republicans. I would have to imagine that's a number that you want to raise.
That is a number that I want to raise, and in fact, I've been very outspoken. Having only 13 Republican women in Congress is a crisis, but it's something that we can improve. I have been focused on recruiting women and also providing the financial infrastructure to support women candidates before their primaries. In the last election cycle in 2018, I chaired recruitment for the National Republican Congressional Committee, and Republicans successfully recruited over 100 women. The challenge we found was getting those women through the primaries. Only about half succeeded in their primary election. So you need to get them through the primaries before they can move on to the general election and hopefully become a member of Congress. So I've brought together numerous women's groups on the right, part of the Republican ecosystem, to really make this a goal as we head towards 2020 to elect more Republican women.
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting number there that you bring up, because the candidates are turning out. The tough part is, and people forget about this, you have to get them through primaries in many cases in order to even get them into the halls of Congress in the first place. Obviously, to understand how to recruit and win these elections, you have to understand what the issue is. Why do you think Republican women are having such a tough time ending up in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think, again, it stems back to having the infrastructure to succeed in the primary. What the Democratic Party has been very successful at over a number of decades is having organizations like Emily's List, like skills training organizations specifically focused on supporting women in primaries. Republicans need to focus on that as well. I'm supporting candidates not based on a litmus test issue like Emily's List, but candidates who are running on under the Republican banner, who are running for the best interests of their district. So we're looking not just at the swing seats, but also the very strong Republican seats. You have to give them the skills training. You also have to help them develop a strong campaign strategy, as well as a strong team, and raise the money in order to get their message out to voters. So I've been overwhelmed by the outpouring of support and the outpouring of candidates I've heard from across the country. It's only March of 2019, so a long way away from the November 2020 elections, but already I've spoken with dozens of women candidates in key seats that will determine the House majority and key open seats for the Republican Party, and it's a great opportunity for us to invest early in them to help them win their primaries.
Now, you beat what some might consider some long odds. At the time, you were the youngest female member ever in Congress. What did you take away from your own experience that has kind of fueled your, I guess you would say, your information when you go into recruiting these candidates, and maybe some advice that you can give them that you took away from your own experience running for Congress?
Well, I tell them if I can do it, you can do it as well. I had a lot of naysayers when I first thought about running for Congress, a lot of naysayers in the Washington, D.C. political ecosystem. I did have a lot of support in the district from my family, from my friends, and from my former colleagues who encouraged me to step up and run for office. It was definitely a long shot, and it ended up being one of the top tier races in the country, flipping a seat from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, and I had a very hotly contested primary. I did earn support significantly in that primary in terms of financial support, where people and voters in the district saw the importance of having a non-traditional and a new type of candidate to help put us in a stronger position in the general election. So I typically tell candidates, if I can do it, you can do it, but also be authentic and be yourself. Tell your unique story. One of the bad pieces of advice I was given was run away from the fact that you were young. I didn't take that advice, luckily, and instead I talked about how that was a strength, how people were yearning for non-traditional, new and fresh candidates, so I really leaned into the fact that I was young.
Now, Congresswoman, we're getting close to the break here, but one thing I did want to ask you before we get to that break is obviously we're talking about the disparity between the numbers of Democratic women in Congress as opposed to Republican women, but Democrats typically have an enrollment advantage as far as female voters aligned with their party, and people forget that the first woman ever elected to Congress was a Republican. Do you think there's a chance at some point we could ever see those numbers switch where more women are registered as Republicans or there are more Republican women in Congress? Right now it seems unthinkable.
Well, certainly you hit on an important point. While it's important to recruit women, it's also important to win women voters and make sure that women are registered Republicans. I think that has been a success story at the local level, whether it's some of our local elected leaders who are Republican women or our state senators or state assembly women. We have a history in upstate New York of supporting strong Republican women in state, local, and federal races. But I absolutely think the party needs to be focused on making sure that our policies and our message resonate with women voters, because women voters are the majority of voters in this country. And that's something that I've spoken with my colleagues about and that we'll be working on. One way we can address that is through reaching out to suburban women specifically. That was a really important demographic group, not just in this past election, but it will be going forward. My colleague, Ann Wagner, who's a Republican from St. Louis, she has relaunched the Suburban Caucus, which is going to be very important for Republicans to win back those voters.
All right, well, the Congresswoman has agreed to stay with us graciously for a few more minutes, so we have to take a quick break here on In Focus. Much more to come, though, with Congresswoman Elise Stefanik when we return here on In Focus.